Chapter 5 is about theories applied to teaching and learning. And there's going to be many theorists that we study in all of the early childhood classes that you take. A few of the primary ones are Jean Piaget and Lev Vygotsky. When we talk about theory, we're talking about basically a statement of principles and ideas used to explain how things happen. And so basically, Vygotsky and Piaget and other theorists have studied young children, and through their studies have come up with these principles and ideas that explain how children, in this case, how children learn. We're studying cognitive development with Vygotsky and Piaget. When we're talking particularly about early childhood education, we're thinking about how they learn and develop cognitively, physically, socially, and emotionally. You probably have studied Jean Piaget if you've taken any psychology class. He might look familiar. He studied how children learn. He basically is telling us that there are specific developmental stages that all children go through around the world. They progress through each stage and in the same order, although they might vary in the rate because development is variable. It's a result of maturity and experiences. So it's the pure natural development of the child growing, but also really dependent on experiences. So you will hear me say a lot in classes about children need lots of experiences because that's really building the brain. And all of that brain development in the early years is going to set the stage for later learning. We want to make sure that they have ongoing developmentally appropriate activities that are going to lead to a conceptual understanding about how the world works. Piaget is a stage theorist, which means that there's 4 stages to his theory. Sensory, motor, and pre-operational are the 2 that we focus on in early childhood. Concrete, operational, and formal operational are more elementary school age. The important thing to remember about the sensory motor stage is that children are interacting with their environment and learning about the environment through their senses. So smelling and tasting and touching, all of those things are very important to the child. In the pre-operational stage, children will begin to represent the world symbolically. So here you can see the little girl using a stethoscope, and she is trying to listen to the heartbeat of her teddy bear. And this is her working out what she has learned about what happens at the doctor. As they get older, children learn rules about how the world works. This is conservation. That's that one where you have 2 different size containers, but the same amount of liquid. And young children are confused or think that the bigger container has more water or more liquid in it, and that's not necessary, and that's not true. And then the adolescents are thinking about the future. They can think outside of an immediate situation. They can start to hypothesize, those sorts of skills. So how this works, according to Piaget, is that our brains are busy building schemas through interactions with the environment. And interaction is anything from a child individually playing with a toy to being in a group and playing cooperative games to just going for a walk, going in the car, having experiences with other people. So I like to think of schemas as little file folders that we have in our brain that are formed through the thoughts and actions that result from our experiences. And schemas change and develop as we have new experiences. We change old schemas and develop new ones when we get new information about the world. So that, according to Piaget, is called assimilation and accommodation. So if a young child has a dog and has never experienced a cat before, they're going to go through assimilation and accommodation the first time they experience a cat. So say the child has a dog, goes over to grandma's house, grandma got a cat, And the child's brain is automatically working, like flipping through that schema that they have about a dog, trying to figure out if this animal matches. And through accommodation, they're going to change how the child thinks about what this new animal is once they study it. And somebody is probably the child will probably say something like dog, and the adult will probably say, no, this is a cat, and then maybe point out some similarities and differences. And eventually that accommodation will happen, and then they'll add cat to their schema for furry animals with 4 legs. Along with assimilation and accommodation, Piaget and constructivist learning theory go together. Constructivism is the theory that emphasizes the active role of children in developing their understanding and learning. And so back when I said children learn through experiences, this is exactly what I mean. Children need to learn through active learning, be physically and mentally engaged. Hands-on activities are the best, where they're actually doing something, not just sitting there being a passive learner. And we always say play is children's work in early childhood. They're not necessarily forced to do it, and they don't get money for it, but they do learn about the world around them through play. This idea of constructivism was really a shift in thinking about knowledge being a product, like something that you are able to spit out at the end of an exam, to really knowledge as a process, and building new knowledge on top of existing knowledge is how people learn. Students are not empty vessels waiting to be filled. I like this. We don't just flip open their brains and pour, information in and spit it out on an exam. Although sometimes I think that would be easier. Knowledge is not factoids to be memorized, and it's not linear. We visit and revisit ideas. And like I said, new knowledge is based on prior knowledge and those experiences that we've had. So when you think about children that come to our programs, and we might be doing some initial assessment with them to see where they are in their development, one of the things that if we feel like maybe they're behind in a developmental area, we need to think about what might be the cause of that. Sometimes it's experiences. Sometimes children just have not been out doing a lot of things, and that's going to affect vocabulary. It's going to affect how they think about the world. And the important part to remember is those experiences are building the brain, and building the brain at an early age is setting the stage for later learning and academic success. So for the constructivist classroom, we really highlight the pursuit of student questions and interests. And so we want to focus on what children are interested in our classrooms, because of course that is going to spark learning. We really use a lot of manipulative materials and the actual sources, the actual thing, if we can. So instead of just textbooks and workbooks that we look on the page, we are actually using the manipulatives, like the blocks or the colored bears, to count. Instead of the instructor being an authoritative role, it's more the student. The teacher interacts and negotiates with students, gets them thinking about what they're learning about. Lots of different types of assessment, observations, points of view. Process is important. It's not just the end product, like what you get on the end of a unit exam. It's, the process of learning the topics and the information as they went along. Knowledge is dynamic and changes with experiences. And when students work in groups, they are learning in a different way and learning from each other versus students working individually. You may have seen this before. Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn. And so being involved with hands-on activities is how children learn best. So when we are thinking about Piaget and constructivist theory, this cognitive theory of development is all about how children think and understand and learn. Piaget tells us that we have existing schemas of thought that are enriched and changed through interaction with the physical and social world. And through direct experiences with the physical world, children develop intelligence. That leads us to Vygotsky, and Lev Vygotsky is going to add another layer onto this as he talks about how children learn in a social environment. His sociocultural theory tells us is not a stage theory. It's not in stages like Piaget's was, but it's this idea that children's cognitive, linguistic, and social development is supported by and enhanced through social interaction. Basically, he's saying that children seek out and learn best through ongoing interactions with caregivers and peers. This idea of sociocultural interactions is important to children's learning. The zone of proximal development and scaffolding are two key terms when we look at Vygotsky's theory. So let's start with the zone of proximal development here. The zone of proximal development on this chart is purple, and that's the range of tasks that are too difficult to master alone, but can be learned with guidance and assistance. So there's three kind of levels here. It's what the child can absolutely do on their own. It's up here is what the child can't do at all. And in the middle, it's what they can do with help. And when you think about this help is what they're getting from adults and peers, because they are getting some kind of assistance in learning that task. And that assistance is what we in education, what we call scaffolding. So if you think of scaffolding from a construction point of view, the scaffolding is kind of like holding a painter up so that they can paint the walls up high, or they can put the bricks up high, right? It's kind of, supporting that construction worker. When we think about this with young children, scaffolding is providing some kind of assistance. So it can be like when we use a hand-over-hand process to help young children wash their hands appropriately. It can be helping the child and give them hints as to how to put the puzzle piece in the correct place. It can be